Dr. Bowman, we are streaming.
Thank you.
Dr. Bowman, now that we're streaming, you can start the meeting whenever you're ready.
Okay. So first I'd like to call the meeting to order, and then I'd like to please do a roll call.
Janelle Astorga,
Here.
Rebecca Betson,
Here.
Heather Benavides,
Here.
Courtney Jackson,
Here.
Chair Bowman.
Here. So our second order of business is to consider adoption of the February 26th, 2026 Finance Committee meeting agenda. Does anyone have any discussion?
Well, can I move to adopt the February 26, 2026 Finance Committee meeting agenda first?
I'll second. This is Member Jackson.
Board member Benavides motion to adopt the February 26, 2026 agenda, and board member Jackson seconded. Is there any discussion? Dr. Albright, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Rebecca Betson,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Marikia Bowman.
Yes. So the motion carried. Our next item is to consider approval of the minutes from the Finance Committee meeting on January 29th, 2026. May I have a motion and a second to consider this agenda item?
I move to approve the minutes from the Finance Committee meeting on January 29th, 2026. This is Member Jackson.
I will second, Member Astorga.
Board Member Jackson motion to approve the January minutes, and Board Member Astorga seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, may we please have a roll call vote, Dr. Albright?
Absolutely. Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Rebecca Betson,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Marikia Bowman.
Yes. So the motion has carried. Dr. Albright, did you mention we have no public forum participants?
I did. No one has signed up to speak at public forum today.
Okay, no one signed up for public comment, so we'll move on to the next agenda item. So our next item is an update on the district's investment program for the second quarter of fiscal year 2026. And our presenters are Renette Apodaca, the Chief Financial Officer, and Mark Turnbull, Executive Director Accounting. Ms. Apodaca and Mr. Turnbull, you have the floor.
Okay. Madam Chair, Board Members, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, the item before you is an update for the second quarter. I will hand it over to Mark Turnbull, Executive Director of Accounting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Superintendent Dr. Blakey. Again, this is a discussion item showing the investment results for the period between October 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2025. Included in your documentation is an investment summary. On that summary, first included the procedural directive for the investment program so that new members could see the guidelines, be familiar with the guidelines for this program. Also, so with that, I also included some results of the current of that quarter. As you can see, as my summary says, the book yield on the portfolio slightly decreased from 4.05% to 3.77%. And it was still over the market, slightly above the market yield of 3.58%. There's a small increase in interest earnings for the prior quarter from the last quarter. Showed the investment breakdown, and below that just showed this increases or decreases, or in this case not much change from our investment mix of money market, treasuries, and the local government investment pool. I also included a quarterly investment report from our investment advisors, government portfolio advisors, with some additional information and detail information on the investments. So with that, I stand for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Turnbull. It's good news that we are outperforming the market, and I am excited about that. So does anyone have any discussion questions? I have a question, Mr. Turnbull. So with Treasury investments, I assume those are U.S. Treasury investments?
Yes, they are. Or board member Bowman, our committee chair Bowman, sorry. Yes, they are U.S. Treasury, or they are U.S. agency bonds, but they're highly rated, very safe investments. Rating is AA plus rated bonds. So treasuries are equivalent, basically.
Okay, so I beg the indulgence of my fellow committee members, but I am new, so I like to ask a lot of questions so I know what's happening. Could you tell me, Mr. Turnbull, a little bit about the New Mexico Local Government Investment Pool?
So that is, I was hoping our investment advisor was going to be on.
I am here, Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Yes.
right. It's hard to see.
This
on
is
the-
Deanne Woodring. I cannot see, with Government Portfolio Investor Advisors, and she can answer that question for you.
Sure. Hi, Chair Bowman and the members of the board. I do serve also as the consultant for the State Treasurer's Office and oversee the local government investment pool as well. The local government investment pool is a fund that's managed by the State Treasurer's Office. They're invested in treasuries, agencies, bank deposits, and repurchase agreements, all under 60 days. So what this fund allows you to have there at the district is liquidity as needed. You can pull money out tomorrow as needed. So it's a provider of liquidity as well as your bank deposits. And it's made up in treasuries and agencies and very high quality securities.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Are there any other questions from the committee?
And I'd just like to add one more thing. The key that we
Yes.
have in this program is that the portfolio is diversified. So within your capital funds, within your operating funds, with even in your debt service, we have a balanced portfolio. So as you all hear about interest rates declining, that short-term money market LGIP rate is expected to come down, but we've anchored down and locked in a certain portion of your portfolio. So that's why we have those U.S. Treasuries and agencies, is to maintain diversification, which will smooth out those earnings across the longer period of time. So we have real good discipline built on what you can invest, what you need to keep available, and that's really what all that liquidity core part is about in that report.
Oh, okay, thank you. So what is the term on the U.S. Treasury bonds, just out of curiosity?
They vary for the operating account. We're not going longer than your fiscal year end, so June 30th. In the capital projects and in the capital projects, we go up to 3 years. And then in the debt service reserve fund or the reserve fund, debt service, we go up to 5 years. So there's specific disciplines on each of those. And those were designed based off the purpose. So the debt service reserve is a long-term reserve for you. So it allows us to have a little bit longer maturity, but nothing's exceeding 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
So are there any other questions? All right, if not, let's move on to the next agenda item, please. So our next item is to consider approval of the January 2026 interfunction transfers for the grant budget. And our presenters will be Renetta Apodaca, our Chief Financial Officer, David Behill, Executive Director, Budget and Strategic Planning, and Mihaela Marin, Senior Director, Grant Management. Ms. Apodaca, Mr. Behill, and Ms. Marin, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, thank you for considering approval of the January 2026 interfunction transfers. I do have Ms. Marin to present on this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, presenting for your consideration of approval the interfunction transfers for grant management for the month of January 2026. We have a higher than usual volume of interfunction transfers due to the fact that January for us is a deadline to submit this type of transfers for most of the schools. The only item that I would like to bring to your attention is the Title II correction to salary accounts. And this is an actual correction to the true salary scope. So the budget is aligned to how the position should be defined. These are positions that are teachers teaching teachers. Therefore, their budget should be aligned into 2000 function, not in the classroom. So it's a teacher support function, not a student direct instruction function. So this is just a correction. This is not a salary savings or vacancies generating this. Other than that, I did not notice anything out of the ordinary, and I stand for questions.
Do board members have any questions at this time? Ms. Marin, I'm sorry, Senior Director Marin. Okay, so we're just adjusting our instruction and you're breaking it into various support services. Is that right? What's happening here?
So the budget initially was defined because this is supporting the type of staff members that are similar to resource teachers. But
Okay.
the scope of their job is to directly support and teach our teachers, provide them a framework and guidance on their professional development. This Title II is a funding that supports teaching and learning systems, and it is a scope correction of the budget because these positions are aligned with subject matter specialists.
Okay.
These teachers teaching teachers are subject matter specialists supporting all our schools and all our teachers with their identified needs. So we are correcting the budget just to make sure that they are being tracked in the right place based on their work.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Any other questions from the board? All right, with that, Let's move to the next agenda item. And our next item is to consider approval of January 2026 intra-function transfers for grant budget. And our presenters are Renetta Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer, David V. Hill, Executive Director, Budget and Strategic Planning. It's kind of a cool title. And Mihaela Marin, Senior Director, Grant Management.
Okay. Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, the next item is the intra-function transfers for grant budget. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Ms. Mihaela.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, presenting for your consideration of approval the intra-function transfers for grant management for the month of January 2026. These are small volume routine alignments. We focused, of course, on the deadline, as I mentioned, for inter-function transfers, and I stand for questions.
Okay, give me a moment to locate the page among the 232 pages of our pile of stuff. Just a general question, looking at this very nice graph you've provided for us. Can you tell me a little bit about the compensation line on page 37? Looks like it's going up. On page 37 out of 232.
I have identified it. Thank you, Madam Chair. The alignment that you are seeing, I would need to research across funding sources to clearly identify the exact source for it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that at our next preparation meeting, you could explain? I mean, I just want to know, why I'm sure it's probably okay, but I'm just curious. So I was sick at our last preparation meeting, but for the next one, can you explain it to me, please?
Madam Chair, yes, I would be happy to prepare data and walk you through the numbers that are generating these lines, including their link to the details.
Yeah, I just want to know, is it going for administration, for teachers, for substitutes? Kind of where. And so I'm looking at the intra-function transfer summaries that you've provided, and I do really appreciate your detail and the clarity. So in Fund 24101, can you tell me what it looks like? There was a fair amount of movement there, our first line fund. Can you tell me what was going on there? We have red on contract services, professional development, equipment, software, substitutes, other, and a big move to compensation. So can you talk to me about that? This is page 38.
Yes, Madam Chair, I went over, I scanned the detail associated with the summary data. And the way I am looking at it, we are seeing alignment for salaries and benefits account. Usually the benefit accounts are, the benefits are usually being revised and start taking effect at the beginning of the calendar year, so in January.
Okay.
Therefore, if the employees have made changes and are pulling increased benefits, our salary budget lines need to be increased and adapted to cover whatever changes are in these benefits.
Okay.
And this is
That
across
makes
the
sense.
board. It's not just teachers or just supporting staff.
Okay, I think that's probably what we're seeing on that blue line I was asking about. Okay, so what about this preschool IDEA B Fund 24109 on 39. What's that?
This is the special education federal flow-through funding that goes to support supplemental services to exclusively to our pre-K students.
Okay. So it looks like we moved some money from equipment into software.
That is correct. The program identified the justification for that budget transfer as access to the Waterford Reading Academy that will allow students to utilize the licenses on a daily basis. So continuous support.
Okay, so you're saying these are special ed preschool students,
Yes.
but we're giving them software.
It is a collaborative process, and I can I actually seems to have Dr. Blea on the line, and she might be able to provide additional detail on this particular question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the committee, Superintendent Dr. Blakey. Waterford is one of the software sources that is available from the PED that they sanction for students in preschool to use. And so my understanding from this transfer is that the money was moved to make sure that all of our students have access. And in some cases, they purchase a license that's above and beyond what was previously purchased and or provided for by PED.
Okay. Well, this is not a budget matter. It's more of a policy matter, but I know that there are certainly constituents who aren't too enthused about putting preschool kids in front of computers. So I'm just noting that for the minutes. All right. So going to the immigrant programs, we increased compensation. We moved from contract to compensation. Can you tell me about that on page 40, Renetta?
Yes, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'll take that. Madam Chair, Committee and Superintendent Dr. Blakey, these funds were moved to ensure that we have funding in the correct places for the immigrant summer program. And so we just received our budget and we did move items around to make sure that everything aligns so that that program has what they need. And in this case, that was to ensure they had the staffing.
Okay, well, that's great. So I note for the record that that is awesome that we have a program, a summer program. So fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Blakey. Student Support and Academic Enrichment Fund 24189. Looks like we're giving more money for professional development and a little bit more for equipment and my not favorite software. Does that sound right?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, that is correct. This is also in alignment with some of our private school funding. That is also included on these line items.
Private or charter or what? Private?
Private schools. Through equitable services under ESSA, we do have to provide title funds to private schools. So that you are seeing some of the private school movement in those funds.
Okay, that's interesting. All right. Well, tell me about the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Mini Grants Fund. I know everybody on this board wants literacy and we all completely agree on that. So what are we doing there with contract services?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, we are moving the budget into a holding account. That grant period has ended. And so we want to make sure that we don't overspend.
Okay. Right. And what are we spending on the contract services? What is the spending exactly?
Madam Chair, if I may jump in, you will notice that the location for this particular contract is grants management.
Right.
Yes, so the grant management location is used exclusively for holding. It is used to pull back funding that should not be accessed because it is either not approved or expired or over budgeted, let's say. If funding is moved into that location, it is not meant to be spent. It is not for an actual contract. it is specifically as the grant management holding account. This combination is unique for us, and we use it as a financial tool to ensure, in this case, that no overspending happens after the deadline, therefore reimbursement cannot be completed.
Okay, thank you very much. I see we have some money for Indian education grant and Hispanic education, but it's not controversial, so I won't ask any questions. And then just because we're all interested in this, can you talk to me about Fund 27114 early literacy and reading support?
Madam Chair,
On
members of
page 45.
Superintendent Dr. Blakey, this is school program movement. So the schools are aligning. Originally, they allocated the money for substitutes. At this time in the year, they had not spent any money on substitutes, and so they amended applications and programming to be spent on supplies and equipment to meet that need.
Okay. So do we have any other questions from the board about intra-function transfers? Okay, I see a decrease in the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineer, which is an important organization, IEEE, at Cibola High. That looks like you're just cleaning up something into the correct category. Is that correct? Okay.
Madam Chair, that is correct, yes.
Okay. I'm, of course, unable to read the incredibly tiny print on pages 51 through whatever. I might have to ask for that to be printed for me in advance in the future. But since there are no other questions, can we move to the next agenda item, please? So our next item is to consider approval of January 2026 inter-function transfers for all non-categorical funds. And our presenters are Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial, Renetta, is it Renette or Renetta?
Renette.
Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer, David V. Hill, Executive Director, Budget and Strategic Planning. Ms. Apodaca and Mr. V. Hill, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, Board Member, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, this item is for interfunction for non-categorical funds. So I do have Mr. Vigil on the meeting to present this item. So Mr. Vigil.
Thank you, Renette. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, put forth for your consideration is approval of the January 2026 interfunction transfers for all non-categorical funds. And I'll just start off by saying that, with all of these budget transfers, a budget is just a plan. It's a plan for what you think is going to happen over the course of the year. And during the course of the year, adjustments have to be made for what actually occurs at some of these sites. And so these budget transfers are budget neutral. Nothing is added to the budget, nor nothing is subtracted from the budget. They're just moved to different categories. The way that we manage these budget transfers, and you'll see on page 57, you'll see these different categories. And so these are bigger categories of what we call object codes, okay? And so object codes record things like your salary and benefits, all of your contract services, supplies and equipment, fixed assets, things like that. So they are actual expenses of certain categories. And you'll see that on page 57, the exact amount of decreases are equal the exact number of increases. And so that's what budget transfers are. They are movements within and across functions, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So functions, we're required to establish and maintain budget authority at the function level. So on page 58, you'll see a description of all of the different functions that PED requires us to use. And so when there is an adjustment from functions 1000 to the other functions listed underneath, starting with twos, it requires not only the school board approval and the finance approval, finance committee approval, but it also requires PED approval. And so when we're doing these transfers that cross functions, and that's why we call them interfunction transfers, they require both the approval of the finance committee, the school board, and of PED. And so you'll see that the other way these functions have to do with the proximity to instruction. So for instance, the 1000 function is your direct instruction function. And then the 2000 functions are all your support functions after that. And so that's a different way of categorizing all of these expenses. And you'll see that the farther you get away from function 1000 it demonstrates the proximity of proximity to students. So direct instruction is all of your teachers, EAs, that kind of functions. And the farther away you get from that, the farther away you kind of get from students, if you want to think about it that way. Obviously, you'll see function 4000 is capital outlay, which is construction and construction-related activities, very distant from kind of instruction function. So with that, it follows a schedule of all of the movement for all of the different schools and departments. And with that, I would stand for any questions that you have.
Board members, do you have any questions? Okay, Mr. Vigil, I have a question. So you said our EAs, those people are under the 1000 function, under the instruction function?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, and then what about our bus drivers? Where are they?
Bus drivers are typically in function 2700, which is our to and from transportation. So they are in support services.
Okay, and where are so EAs are for special ed, and are there other types of staff who do ELA or that kind of work? Are they always under 1000?
Most of the time, yes. I think that certain bus assistants that can be considered special ed as well. These are more programmatic in nature, and so and I'm still getting used to the district as well, because it's about my 4th week, Madam Chair. So I'm still learning the exact all of the workings of how APS works. But I can tell you, generally speaking, yes, if they are connected to students on a daily basis, they're recorded in function 1000.
Okay, so I think in the future I'm going to have to ask for some of these smaller print transfer details by school to be printed out for me so I can examine them more closely. But any other questions from the board? So our next item, and I hope I did this right, have we considered approval of 2026 intra function? Are we done with that? Is that what we just did? No. Okay, so that's our next topic. Consider approval of January 2026 intra. It's confusing because there's inter non-categorical, intra non-categorical, so it kind of blends together. All right, Ms. Apodaca and Mr. Vigil, you have the floor.
Okay. Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, the next item, you're correct, is the intra function for non-categorical. And again, I hand it over to Mr. Vigil.
Thank you, Renette. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, put forth for your consideration is approval of the January 2026 intra function transfers. These, the difference between an inter-function transfer and an intra-function transfer is that intra-function transfers happen within that same function. So as I discussed functional categories just a minute ago, what you'll see is sometimes there is a need for adjustments within that function, and those adjustments are made. The difference also is that intra-function transfers only require the Finance Committee approval and the school board approval. They don't necessarily need to be approved at the PED level. But it follows the same requirements for adjustments to the budget.
Okay, can you tell me about Fund 15200 Forest Reserve? What is that? And I see we're moving money to other.
What page is that?
65. At Fund 15200, we moved 196,000 into other.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, I don't have the exact reason why that transfer was actually done. I can tell you Forest Reserve overall is money that we get from the state for our Forest Reserve program. We have certain lands that are part of the National Forest land, and we get sometimes we get mineral rights or mineral leases, that kind of stuff, and those are forwarded on as part of state statute. And I can certainly get to the detail of why that transfer was done, but I don't have it right in front of me at this moment.
Okay, so that's like you're getting some funding from those lands. I guess I'm just interested a little bit in why it goes to other, because that's a pretty big, vague category. But glad to know we're getting money from forest lands. That's cool. All right. So any other questions from the board on intra-function transfers for non-categorical funds?
Chairman Momen, if I could make one more point about that fund as well. That fund also is our ad valorem taxes, or those are also property taxes that come in to the district as well. So it also is an additional revenue source on top of our regular like SEG funds and other state funds. Those ad valorem is taxes are posed to the voters, and so they get to vote on continuing to provide that those tax rates for their property. So that's where some of that money comes from, as well as property taxes.
Okay, great. Well, I certainly support paying a portion of my property taxes into the public schools. I'm happy to know we have these fund sources. I just am somewhat curious about other, just because it's approaching 200,000, like what are we doing with that? So perhaps I understand that this is tedious for those of you who are used to this budget, but I need to understand where this money is going. So please indulge me as we all get used to these complicated categories. So our next item is, we always love this, and we get gifts, grants, or donations more than $5,000. So our next item is to consider approval of gifts, grants, and donations of more than $5,000. So we have a donation of $7,500 from Valley High School from Michael and Judy Johnson. And our presenters are Renette Apodaca and Mark Turnbull. Ms. Apodaca and Mr. Turnbull, you have the floor, and I will spare you the effort of saying your titles every single time I call on you.
Okay. Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, this item is for donations, and I have Mr. Turnbull on the meeting to discuss this. So, Mark.
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, again, we present for your consideration a donation of $7,500 to Valley High School from Michael and Judy Johnson. This is going to be for the baseball program. So with that, I stand for questions.
Any questions, board members? How do we, Mr. Turnbull, how do we handle the thank yous on that? Who writes the thank you note when we get a nice donation like that?
We don't have a set procedure for that. Sometimes board members have done it in the past. I assume I'm not sure if the school sites themselves do thank you letters. That might be something else that happens. But I'll check on that, see what I can find out.
This
How
is
much?
a donation. This is Board Member Betson, and this is a donation in District 3. I would be happy to write a thank you letter.
Thank you so much, Board Member Betson. I really appreciate it. Dr. Albright, do we have official like stationery for APS somewhere?
We do. Let Mark and I work together a little bit and get back to you guys on a process.
Okay, fantastic. Are there any other questions about that gift? All right, if not, our next item is to consider approval of statement of equipment to be taken out of service from December 1st through 31st, 2025. And Ms. Apodaca and Brian Allison, Senior Director, Capital Fiscal Services, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Blakey, the next item is for our equipment taken out of service in December. So I hand it over to Brian Allison to present on this item.
Thank you, Renette. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, I am presenting for you to consider the approval of our statement of equipment to be taken out of service from December 1st through December 31st of 2025. There was attached documentation that lists the equipment and furniture that we remove and are scheduled for disposal. That is in accordance with our New Mexico state statute. This process helps us ensure that our resources are managed responsibly and helps with the efficiency of our operations across APS departments. I am glad to answer any questions.
Board members? Mr. Allison, Senior Director, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I am interested in kind of what our, can you tell me what page we're looking at?
I apologize, Madam Chair. How I pull it is I go into our agenda, and it's the same. As I submit them to you, I already print out my information. So I am not sure what page it would be on for you. My apologies. Is someone able to assist me with that?
I believe it's page 83.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, I will study that for next meeting to understand what exactly that section is, because that looks kind of interesting, actually. So our next item is to consider a pretty large amount of money, approval of district purchase or expenditure that equals or exceeds $500,000 for E-rate 13 Phase 1 network switch and access point replacement. Sounds like technology of some sort, including granting signatory authority to the board president and secretary for all necessary documents needed to complete the E-rate work. And our presenters are Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer, Adrian Sanchez, Executive Director, Procurement, Dr. Antonio Gonzalez, Deputy Superintendent Operations, and Dr. Richard Bowman, my cousin, Chief Technology Officer. He's not really my cousin, but you don't meet that many Bowmans. Ms. Apodaca and Ms. Sanchez, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam Chair, Board Member Superintendent Dr. Blakey, the item before you is approval for a district purchase. The procurement department did issue an RFP for these goods and services. The awarded vendor is Valcom, Salt Lake City, and they will be doing switch purchases, access point, licensing, and the estimated purchase is $7 million using capital and federal funds. So we stand for questions.
I have no questions. Do any other board members have questions? Okay, our next agenda item is to consider approval of district purchase or expenditure that equals or exceeds $500,000 for manufacturer processing USDA commodities. I assume that's food. And we will hear from Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer, Adrian Sanchez, Executive Director Procurement, Dr. Antonio Gonzalez, Deputy Superintendent, and Marie Johnson, Executive Director, Food and Nutrition Services.
Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, the consideration approval of this also is for purchases of food, like you had mentioned. APS did issue a request for proposal, and this is for 1 year. It is for $8 million using federal funds. And in the board report, you will see the awarded vendors. As you can see, there's many vendors that do have different items that we purchase from for the school year for our food and nutrition.
Okay, my only question is, it would be nice if we could see some New Mexico vendors on this list. See one Colorado vendor, but that is not finance's problem. But it may be something we want to think about. Okay, any other questions from board members? Okay, our next item is to consider approval of district purchase or expenditure that equals or exceeds $500,000 for a solar photovoltaic system, design, installation, replacement, and on-call services. Presenting, we have Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer, Adrian Sanchez, Executive Director Procurement, Dr. Antonio Gonzalez, Deputy Superintendent Operations, and Karen Alarid, Executive Director, Capital Construction. Ms. Apodaca and Ms. Sanchez, you have the floor.
Yes. Madam Chair, board member, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, this item is also for a purchase of solar photovoltaic system design, installation, replacement, and on-call services. You do have a board report that has the awarded vendors, also the pricing. This is estimated annual spend of $3.3 million. And initially, it's a 3-year contract with an option for 3 additional years. And we stand for questions.
I have no questions, board members. All right, with that, let's move to consider approval of district purchase or expenditure that equals or exceeds $500,000 for asbestos environmental abatement on-call services as needed. Our presenters are Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer, Adrian Sanchez, Executive Director Procurement, Dr. Antonio Gonzalez, Deputy Superintendent Operations, and John Dufay, Assistant Deputy Operations.
Madam Chair, board member, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, this is also approval of purchases that will exceed $500,000. This is an on-call contract as needed with no minimum guaranteed. In your packet, you have a board report with the awarded vendors and also with the pricing from the vendors. And it is estimated to be a 4-year contract, and we use operational and capital funds.
Any questions from our board members? with that, let's move on to the next agenda item. Our next agenda item is to consider approval of district purchase or expenditure that equals or exceeds 500,000 for a district-wide communication platform. We will hear from Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer, Adrian Sanchez, Executive Director Procurement, and Johanna King, Chief Communications Officer. Ms. Apodaca and Ms. Sanchez, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, this item also is for consideration of approval for a purchase that exceeds 500,000. The procurement department issued a request for proposal, and we do have the evaluation summary as part of the packet and also the board report. The award vendor is Parent Square. This is estimated to be a contract for 1.5 million using technology funds, and it is a 8-year contract. We stand for questions.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I do have a question.
Oh, please proceed. Board
Thank
members.
you. So first of all, I did send in my technical and my tactical questions on this particular item beforehand. So I really appreciate you all answering those questions before we got here, as well as posting them to the agenda. So thank you very much for that. So I'm going to turn to a little bit more strategic question on this particular platform, which is, there's two questions that I have is, how did you know that a new communication-wide system was necessary for Albuquerque Public Schools? And then second to that, how does this new platform fit into our stated goals and guardrails?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and Superintendent Blakey. I think I can try to address that. So the platform that we've been using, School Messenger, is outdated. It was bought out and by another vendor several years ago. It is no longer supported. Guardrail 4, if I recall, it talks about how important it is for us to make sure we have open communications, that we give people voice. We can't give people voice if we can't communicate with them. So it's really critical that we communicate with our families and with our staff and our community. This particular platform is one of the things that we heard. We did do a survey, and we also went to the superintendent's advisory committees. And what we heard is that parents, families, staff want an easier all-in-one platform so they don't have to go all over the place to look for information. This platform does offer that. It does have an app. It also gives us the ability to text, to email, has a newsletter service. It does tie into our existing student information system. It allows us to use social media. So it's a kind of an all-in-one platform, which makes things more convenient, more consistent in our messaging. And we did hear from families that was a struggle, that they were having to go several places to find information, having to dig for information. So this will allow us to kind of be more consistent. Everyone's using the same tool. The other thing that concerned us, because the platform we're using is out of date, is that some of the people in the district were using their own apps going, and understandably, they wanted to find a system that worked. But sometimes the system, what they were using, may not have been appropriate for the use that, for school, for privacy, for things like that, accessibility, translation abilities, and things like that. So we do believe that this communications is really important with our families and our staff, and having a tool, a modern tool that's all in one, will help us do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I ask a follow-up, please?
Yes, please. Very good question, Board Member Jackson. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Sure. So Ms. King, just to kind of follow up on that, and I'm sure the answer is yes, but is there going to be a communication strategy around the rollout of this platform not only to families, but also to the schools and the staff so that the training is cohesive as possible?
Absolutely. The proposal among the scope of work is how they'll help us roll that out in the most convenient way to do that, making sure that we can use it at the district level, at the school level, and even at the classroom level. So yes.
Okay. And then just one final question, and this was slightly addressed in my more tactical question that I sent in beforehand. Is there going to be like a strategic dissolution of some of the other platforms that we've been using so that there's there's a financial benefit to moving to one platform versus having all of the others?
Yes, it'll have to be a phase in. We'll have to, first do the back end, the technology, and then the training, and then we'll phase in, and then there'll be an expectation that once everyone's been trained on it, that this is the platform that we use.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for acknowledging the guardrail that this is meant to address. I appreciate it. And thank you for answering my questions beforehand.
Any other questions from board members on this topic? Okay, with that, our next item is to consider approval of the January 2026 cash disbursements. And our presenters are Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer.
Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Dr. Blakey. This item is approval of the disbursements from January 2026. According to New Mexico Procedures for Public School Supplement 7, this is required to be presented to the local school board. So this meets the requirements. There was a question about the items that are in the packet. So in the packet, we did provide not just the disbursements, because the disbursements are the checks, basically the payments to vendors, to suppliers, but we also put in the payroll amounts, because payroll is probably our largest expenditure, as you are aware of. So we do put in a table of the expenditures for payroll, and then followed by that, we do have the expenditures starting for this fiscal year by the categories that you see in the inter and intra function. We use the same categories to be consistent, and you can track those also. The next AP summary has the same information, but in expense categories. And then finally, we give you an actual detail listing of each voucher that was paid to the vendors. It includes the voucher number, a description, and also the name of the vendor and the amount. So you get the same information in a couple different ways. And these are all the payments to the suppliers and then the payroll to staff. So I stand for any questions.
Board members, do you have any questions? Okay, with that, our next item is to consider recommending the consent agenda board approval of items discussed during the February 26th, 2026 Finance Committee meeting, including January 2026 inter and intra function transfers for grant budget, January 2026 inter and intra function transfers for all non-categorical funds, gifts, grants, and donations of more than $5,000, statement of equipment taken out of service, district purchases or expenditures that equal or exceed 500,000, including E-rate Phase 1 network switch and access point replacement, including granting signatory authority to the board president and secretary for all necessary documents needed to complete the E-rate work, manufacturer processing USDA commodities, solar photovoltaic system design, installation, replacement, and on-call services, asbestos environmental abatement on-call services as needed, as well as a new district-wide communication platform. Finally, also January 2026 cash disbursement. So we need a motion and a second to consider this agenda item.
I move we recommend consent agenda board approval of the items discussed during the February 26, 2026 Finance Committee meeting, as noted by the chair.
This is Board Member Benavides. I'll second.
So we've got Board Member Jackson who motioned to approve the consent agenda and Board Member Benavides who seconded. Is there any discussion? So, Dr. Albright, may I please have a roll call vote?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Rebecca Betson,
Yes.
Heather Benavides,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Warikia Bowman.
Yes. So the motion has carried. Now these items, once approved, will be on a consent agenda at the March 4th meeting. The March 4th, 2026 Board of Education meeting. So our next item is to announce the next Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, March 26th, 2026 at 3 p.m. virtually. And this meeting is adjourned.